ideal world, if you had unlimited time, money, and resources, every candidate interaction would start with a conversation.
Hey, Prem, thanks so much for taking the time
Yeah,
to
yeah.
chat today. Maybe share a little bit about your story and just who you are generally.
Yeah, absolutely. Prem Kumar, co-founder and CEO of Humanly. My background is primarily in product, HR tech, and who I am. I've spent a lot of time in the tech space. I love sports. I went to the University of Washington in here in Seattle. I'm a Seattle guy, and that's kind of where I got the idea for Humanly as I was graduating there. I was entering the workforce and just bombarded by lots of, well, I won't say I was bombarded by job opportunities, but I was applying to a lot. And really there, I just got my first introduction to some of the inefficiencies in the hiring process. And really that got my career going in HR tech. But yeah, that's just a little bit about me.
Maybe for a broader context, share a little bit about what Human Lead does. For someone that's maybe just hearing it about it for the first time.
Yeah, so at the end of the day, anytime you're having a two-way conversation with a job candidate, whether that's over Zoom or over the internet or over SMS, we want to make it more efficient and more equitable. So we're in the business of making two-way conversations with job candidates more efficient and more equitable. So we do that in a bunch of different ways, but that's the space we're in. So we're not in the candidate tracking space where or the sourcing space. We don't help you find candidates or track them, but once you're talking to them, we want to maximize the impact you're having in those two-way candidate conversations.
When you think about making the transition from a product manager to being a CEO, what are some of the pitfalls that you feel like have maybe come from a background in product management and some of the strengths where you've thought these are really skills and assets that you brought to the table because of being a product manager?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and I think it somewhat depends on the type of company that you're a CEO of. So if you're a CEO of a SaaS like product led company, then I'll give an answer in kind of that realm. It might be a little different in other areas, but yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest things is beginning with the end in mind, beginning with what the problem you are solving is. And I think as a CEO, oftentimes, just like as a product manager or just like as a dad of an eight-year-old and 5-year-old, I'm jumping. My natural tendency is to jump into the solution. And I think as I learned more about product management, being a good product manager isn't just about solving everything and finding a problem for your solution. It's about finding a solution for your problem. So I found that I learned to be good at that through product management, and then I applied it to being a parent, then I applied it to being a CEO, and not just diving in and giving answers to people. I think the sign of a good leader is not necessarily what happens when you're in the meeting, but how effective the team is when you're not in the room or when you're out. So I think that empowerment and leading with the problem that you're solving is one thing that I would say.
Now that you're in the building phase, how do you help your team to adopt this mindset of like looking for problems and not solutions?
Yeah, I think part of it is a culture thing. So creating a culture where when folks dive too quickly into solution, calling it out in a constructive way and asking the right questions. So I think a lot of it has to do with holding each other accountable to asking the right questions. I still catch myself doing the jumping to solution a lot. So and I'm lucky that we've created a culture where people call me out if I'm going too deep and so curiosity is really important, just kind of understanding how things work and why things happen in the way they are. I think that helps you jump to a solution. And, now it's an interesting time where there's a lot of attention placed on solutions like AI. And I think a lot of times folks are looking at AI as a business strategy or but really it's one solution. Maybe it's better than others at certain things, but it's still just a solution. So really, starting with the problem is now more important than ever with so many different solutions that can be powerful. But yeah, I think leading by example is another way. And yeah, hiring the right folks that are curious and they're kind of pushing forward this culture. It can help us have the whole team embody that mindset.
I kind of want to double down on this concept
Yeah.
because being able to tell someone in a candid way oh, hey, I think we're kind of focusing on the solution a little bit too much, and we need to take a step back and understand what the problem that we're solving for users is so much easier said than done. And it's so much easier said than done, especially like even at a startup, where usually the employee base is a little bit smaller. You still feel this like a little bit power dynamic gap with like your manager or the CEO. So like, do you have an example that comes to mind of like when someone has told you, hey, I think we might be focusing a little bit to solutioning and like how kind of more context around that or an example?
Yeah, I'll give you one from this morning actually. So I got off a call and I was really excited about we need to build a Chrome extension that does X, Y, and Z. And I think a Chrome extension is a solution, and someone asked me a lot of questions, which is really good questions around, what are the different types of tasks that our customer and our users want to accomplish. And then what are first let's find out kind of what problem they're solving and the types, like the jobs to be done, the types of tasks they're doing, and then we can figure out the right types of, like, maybe this type of thing should be done via Chrome extension. This should be done via mobile. This should be done. So I found myself like jumping ahead a little bit. And I also think like jumping into solution, it's not always like literally jumping into a solution, but it's jumping ahead of process. So I think like
Mm,
go back, like jumping into design when we should be thinking about requirements, or jumping into testing when it's so I do think when people jump ahead, you can kind of, it's actually, I think that's actually good energy that causes someone to jump ahead. They're just excited and they see something that seems like it makes sense to them. So I think if you can kind of harness that energy, and instead of saying no, like I think the way not to do it in that example, if someone would have said, no, you're wrong, like you're not following process, or but instead of doing that, and instead of saying you're wrong, take that energy and ask the question around kind of, what problem what problem are you solving with this, or kind of coaching me or someone else to take a step back in process, but kind of using that energy for something good versus shutting down the energy. So if you can take the energy and
mm.
rechannel it, that to me is, it can be powerful.
That really resonates with me because as you were sharing this, I think that's something very uh just anecdotally something that I have identified that I have a lot of excitement about ideas generally, and I see a lot of potential for them. And doing that preemptive de-risking to just say, what's the problem that we're solving? What are the risks we need to consider? Is there, a really solid validated problem here? Or are we kind of just wanting to enable the use of this new tool or solution? What's going on? So great reminder. I am curious for your user journey generally. When you think about what the measure of success is for users, like, you know, Airbnb would have maybe like nights booked in a month. What is Humanly's measure of success for their users?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So we have two. One is more on the candidate side, and one is more on the customer, the recruiter side. So we have kind of two general personas or types of users. And one thing I'll say is we're a fairly early stage company, and this has evolved. So I think it's really important to have a North Star. It's really important to have a measure of success. It's really important to identify how you can create journeys that lead to that success when you're doing onboarding, when the customer is just starting, how you get them to that success moment as
Mm,
quickly as possible, minimizing the time to success or time to value. On the candidate side, and another like factor too is, you want to make it measurable, so you can't necessarily always measure everything, but how can you kind of come up with something that is easy enough to measure and is impactful at the same time. So yeah, one of our measures of success is candidate experience. So we measure that by asking candidates about their experience with the product. And it's not a after, like a post survey, but it's in the moment. So in time while they're talking with the chat, we'll
mm,
get data around that. And then the other piece is we're really focused on how much time we can save you. Like I really do feel that when we think about things like AI, AI has infinite time, humans don't. So how do we use that AI on things are more repetitive to then allow humans to spend that meaningful time on things that matter. So time savings is a big measure of success for us. So how one of the on our dashboard here at the company will have one of the ways of showing time savings is the amount of conversations with
Mm,
candidates we're able
mm,
to do in a successful way that's now taken off the recruiter's plate. So we've had this year we've got about 2 million candid conversations that have
whoa.
happened in a way that is rated high by the candidate, is less biased, but is also saving time because the recruiter is not having to physically or be there virtually either. So
Right. Not answering the same question over and over and like,
yeah,
okay, how can we?
yeah, totally, totally.
And this is maybe a bit of a spicy question, but how are we defining equitable?
Yeah, not spicy at all. Like, it is a good question though. So, lots of ways to define it. So, I would say you can't change what you don't measure. So, I think the first thing there is measurements, and there are some measurements that our customers might already have in place. So, I would in a typical way that we measure it, having a structured interview that's standardized and fair, and I'll tell you what I mean by fair, is important to us. So one of the things that our data shows, I'll give you one example. Like if I was interviewing right now, we would not, our tool would tell me I'm not being very equitable right now because I'm speaking over 150 words per minute. Which is not equitable for candidates where English is a second language. If I was interviewing someone where English was a second language, for example, we've found data in these two-way Zoom conversations where certain candidates are getting less time to speak. So that is another thing that I find not to be equitable. So how do you ensure that you're showing up in a standardized way to who you're interviewing? And then the other piece is through like the chatbot piece of it. Can we use language that is not biased and not gendered language is a common way of being inequitable. So can we use gender neutral language, which we find will get you a higher conversion rate? So when in our space, we're in the conversational space. So how do we have those two-way conversations happen in a more standardized and structured way? Last thing I'll say too is it's not always about being exactly the same. So when I talk to like the head of autism hiring at Microsoft, they had a program to help folks with to hire folks with autism spectrum disorder. And one of the things they find is giving structure and options up front. So not everyone necessarily wants to jump into like a video call right away. So can you give options? So I think to us it starts with being consistent, but also
Mm.
providing different options based on a candidates. We call it kind of choose your own adventure, but based on how candidates want to show up in the interview.
My mind is kind of now racing through all of these different personas of interviewees and what things they value and what things they need for success, and how can we enable the interviewer to help them shine and really capture their value, which is a whole, I'm sure you've spent a lot of time thinking about who that persona is and the main ones, but that is really fun.
Yeah, you're a good product manager. Yeah, no, absolutely. There's a lot of personas to think about, and obviously we're early stage, so there's only so many things we can focus on. But that's those are some of the areas that are important to us.
One of the other things that I kind of was thinking about as I was learning about Humanly was, I think your dad has this story of taking his application to various schools and like really, trailblazing to get into the school and like putting in this effort and grit that maybe helped him edge above other candidates and really be considered. And for people coming from non-traditional backgrounds for education specifically, where like maybe they haven't gone to college, maybe they, just got their GED, and a lot of tech companies in recent years have gone through various stages of taking away their college requirements and having more in-house education and trying to really facilitate an environment where if you have the skills and the attitude, they're willing to train you, since a lot of the college graduates maybe haven't been to the level of quality that an employee might expect. How is Humanly thinking about allowing and creating a space, especially in the automated chat where you're just kind of going through, here's your resume, allowing those candidates like stand out and be like, hey, I actually have done something, even if I don't have this degree, something like that.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, I think we're there is a movement towards looking at the whole person and looking at things like skill-based hiring. Really, I think there, like, because of the inefficient, like, there's a lot of technology that's made it very easy to apply. So there's, in some roles, there's high candidate volume. So what that means is on the other side of things, hiring teams are using shortcuts. And I look at a resume as a shortcut to learn about a person. The cover letter is a shortcut, a application process. So you're finding these biased shortcuts to take a giant list and make it smaller. I do think in an ideal world, if you had unlimited time, money, and resources, every candidate interaction would start with a conversation. You'd be asking questions to learn more about
Mm.
someone than just the piece of paper shortcut. I think eventually we'll live in a world where we don't need to use all these shortcuts. But yeah, we like to use things like chat to not screen people out, but screen them in and let candidates actually screen companies out so you can learn more about the company. So I do believe in the power of having that two-way conversation versus just an application that you kind of throw over the fence. And we've seen a lot of data around, most applications are never seen, and they go into a black hole and whatnot. So I do think that the more you can do to have those kind of two-way dynamics where you're allowing candidates to assess the company, and then using more than just the resume. So can you get into a two-way conversation? Can you understand more about them? I think is important. And it's hard to do, and it's not, it historically has not been done very effectively. So yeah, there's a lot of bias that gets involved when you're just looking at a resume.
And as we've talked just about this, very specific space, there's so many, areas of opportunity and things you're thinking about and this world that you see a future of. What is maybe for 2024 specifically the problem or, space within this realm that you're like most excited about and you're like, we're gonna make a dent in this area?
Yeah, no, I'll tell you specifically what we're doing. So we're basically in a high volume recruiting coordinator position where you're spending time interviewing 7 candidates a day. What we want to do is make it so that we're automating the pre-screening, the scheduling, as well as the note taking and follow-up. So you're just showing up into meetings like this, that are pre-scheduled in your calendar with qualified candidates. The notes are then going into your ATS. So that little loop around the human to human connection, we want to eliminate some of the manual processing around who you meet with, around the meeting itself, and around scheduling. So we're excited about that. And then I think really, yeah, there's a lot in this space, but right now we just want to help people have better two-way conversations with job candidates and through automating some of the parts around that.
It's really just fine tuning the wheel that you've already built and kind of like really making it as seamless as possible.
Yeah, that's what we're going after. There's a good quote around how startups don't die of starvation; they die of drowning. They don't die because they don't have enough ideas, but because they have too many. So we're really focused on just getting really good at that, and then lot of other ideas, but that's our focus right now.
The average lifespan of a startup is about 5 years. And
Yeah.
so I think having that maniacal focus on just like, all right, we don't want to spread ourselves really thin by doing a lot of things not very well. We just want to do one thing really, really well is very hard to do. Very hard to do.
For sure, yeah. No, we've gone through that for sure. But yeah, we're excited to be entering, to be close to year 5, and we'll be around for quite a while. So I'm excited for that.
Wow, that is so impressive. Congratulations, by the way. That is incredible. A concept you had talked about in another podcast was a culture roadmap and how you think about your culture similar to how you would think about planning a product and like what are the, user problems and needs that we have. And I thought that concept was so refreshing and I hadn't heard people talk about their culture in a product way before. So I was curious if you could share more about that.
Yeah, no, I think some of that started, when I was at least the concept behind it when I was at Microsoft and as a product manager. product of old was a disk that you would insert one time, you'd install it, and that's your software. And that's how culture happened. You'd have a leader and they'd install their way of doing the culture, and that's what it was. Then SaaS software came along, and it was more iterative. It was about taking feedback from your users. In the culture case, your users are your employees. It's your current employees, your past
Mm,
employees, your future employees, just like your current users, your past users, and whatnot. So I think understanding for me that the culture is an iterative process, and if I was trying to build something homogenous and get more of the same, we would never grow. So when we hire, I want to build people that will evolve our culture to that next step. From a roadmap standpoint, yeah, there's different features you might need if you're building a scaling culture that is looking to accomplish a different set of goals in year 5 than it is in year 2. So I think understanding that it is dynamic, and what I think good SaaS software product managers do is they take a lot of feedback from customers, and they are not so obsessed. It's not about it's about finding the truth, but the truth is not what I think is right, what our product managers think is right. It's ultimately what the market and customers think is right. And from a culture standpoint, it's what the employees think is right. So, very much, I think our culture is like our brand is not what I say it is. It's what other folks say it is. And I think that applies to culture. So yeah, the iterative piece is really important. So just kind of always thinking about it and not just thinking you have a good culture, because it's you always have to improve each week and each day. So we've done a lot of things internally to get to that stage. But yeah, that's been important to us, having like a roadmap behind it.
a distinction of not looking for culture fits, but looking for culture change, where you're hiring someone who's changing your culture and how are they changing that? It seems like that's something that you're deliberately thinking about. Do you go about looking for like, okay, these are the things that maybe are a little bit weak and also non-negotiables? So like a non-negotiable for us is just like being a generally pleasant to work with person. And
Mhm.
then something that we're kind of weak at right now is we need someone who really understands the virality flow of like how we get new users, and that's something that we're specifically going to go after. Do you think about looking for those skills in future hires, or is that just kind of like a general concept of here's our culture soup, what other ingredients do we need to make it kind of where we want it to be?
Yeah, definitely with future hires, and it kind of also is team based. So if we're making an engineering hire and we feel that the kind of constituency has this cultural dynamic, but we want to add this element to it, that then becomes a higher priority in hiring. Even in when I was pitching to investors, we want to bring on investors. We'd ask them a lot of questions. How diverse is your limited partner group? Tell us more about the partner group. And so I think investors, advisors, obviously candidates. Really, we want to ask pointed questions that help us fill those gaps versus just more generally. So honestly, even like when I think about technology decisions, is this tech going to help our culture, or is it going to hurt it? When you're purchasing an AI tool like Humanly, that's literally talking to all your job candidates, and doing what a recruiting coordinator might do, you might want to ask, is Humanly actually going to help your culture or not? So I would say,
Mm,
stretching beyond just the people, which the people are the biggest part of the culture, but the employees, I should say. But then it's also the tools you're choosing, the office space you're in, the board that you're putting in place, the investors you're allowing to invest in your company. I think all of those things impact it. And I do think more and more people are starting to think about culture more holistically, and also in the sense of not just creating some one thing, but creating a process, like a machine, for how you continually iterate that culture forward. But yeah, it isn't, there's no magic solution yet.
what's a failure that you feel like has really helped you shape mindset or skill or outlook on life?
I think being too slow to just go out and do something like start Humanly, or to start an next job. I with a lot of decisions I made as it relates to my career, I waited too long to start. There's always like a little barrier. So that I would say that would be my general failure.
Just get going, do it.
Yeah, just get going.
It's been seriously so fun. Thank you, thank you. Any way that like if someone's watching this, a way that they could be helpful to you?
Yeah, no, I appreciate you asking. No, I mean, if always feedback on our product, on our website, anything I've said, always looking for feedback. And if anyone wants to talk about anything that I've chatted about here, you can always reach out to me. My email is prem@humanly.io, and you can find me on LinkedIn.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Prem.
All right, thanks, Elizabeth.